note that if people do have to leave, to save the date for June 9th to the 11th, that is going to be the National Gathering of Graduate Students. And it'll be happening virtually, unfortunately, this year. And we will also be hosting the Saskatchewan Indigenous Mentorship Network annual gathering at the same time. So planning is just starting for that between the different networks. But I did want to share that so that people can start putting it in their calendar as well. So we'll be, I'm not sure what the landscape in terms of COVID restrictions will look like in June. So likely most of it will be online, but depending on where things are at, hopefully we can maybe do something, even if it's a small thing, in person come June. So just a little quick save the date there. And we've done our break. So I'll be going through the annual report for 2019-2020. We have Michael Heimlich on the line as well, who's going to be presenting on the midterm report for the Mentorship Network. And then some of our lead principal investigators will be talking about planning for the future with the Mentorship Network. So to begin, I will try and maybe move through this quickly just so we have enough time to touch base on a few different things. Feel free, I'll try and keep an eye on the chat, but also feel free to unmute yourself if you want, just because I may not notice all of the notes there. So if you have questions, yeah, unmute yourself or feel free to pop them in the chat. We're obviously meeting late in terms of our annual general meeting for the 2019-2020 academic year. Normally we would have met in June, but obviously things got postponed and then postponed again because of the pandemic. So thanks to everybody for coming, at this our belated AGM. The annual report is available on our website under the Our Network tab, as are the two past reports. So you can find the full report there. And I've got a few highlights, which I'll skip through from year one and year two. The 2019-2020 year was the third full year of the Mentorship Network grant. We're funded by the Canadian Institutes for Health Research, Institute of Indigenous Peoples Health, and our funding began in 2017 and continues until 2022, though we do have an extension that's been granted as a result of COVID. So part of our planning is figuring out what it looks like, because additional funds, some additional funds have been provided, but not the full amount of an additional year. So we'll need to kind of sort out, what the timeline looks like and how that fits into some of the other work that's happening. So, just to begin by reflecting back on some of our events, I'm going to go through kind of the different topics by each committee. And if anyone on the line is interested in joining one of our committees, please feel free to send me an email or pop a note in the chat. We're always looking for new people to participate, including students and community members who receive honoraria for their participation in the Mentorship Network committees. So depending on the committee, there are kind of different time commitments, but I can provide some more information about that to anybody who is interested. So our events committee meets generally once or twice a year, and we meet to talk about the different activities that I'll be working on organizing. And so it's a nice kind of bouncing off group for sorting out what our plans will look like. In 2019 and 2020, which now feels like a long time ago, obviously, we hosted our second annual gathering at First Nations University in Regina over a couple days, where students shared their research, faculty facilitated workshops, and we were able to get a tour of All Nations Healing Hospital in Fort Capel. We had a variety of other activities that we kind of did as a small group there. About 15, 20 students and a handful of faculty participated. And we received mainly positive feedback on that. And it was nice to rotate locations. The year before had been at Wanuskewin, so that we could connect with some colleagues and students in Regina. In November of 2019, we hosted our second annual, not annual, sorry, our second writing retreat during Reading Week. That took place on the U of S campus. 12 students participated over 3 days. Louise Huff facilitated a 1.5 day workshop. And the last day, graduate writing specialists joined us from the university library to kind of make themselves available as students worked. And then in February, just before lockdown, we hosted our third writing retreat, which took place at Elkridge. And 12 students and about 7 faculty participated. Faculty offered office hours to participating students, and these filled up very quickly and were extended or expanded upon over the course of the week. Students joined us from Regina, Prince Albert, and Saskatoon, as well as from the universities of Regina and Saskatchewan. And faculty joined from First Nations University of Canada and the University of Saskatchewan. We really, the Reading Week writing retreats have been a really fun thing that fun and also hopefully productive for people that we've been hosting. We were hosting regularly until the pandemic hit. So we're looking forward to doing those again once, COVID restrictions are lifted and we're able to do some of that in person. In the meantime, we're doing some other writing activities instead. We also have hosted a number of speakers in partnership with the College of Medicine, College of Nursing, and the Division of Social Accountability. Those have been termed kind of our Indigenous Health Speaker Series. And we hosted, I think, 4 or 5 in that academic year, as well as a number of webinars, including on how to write a successful conference abstract, publishing for academics, grant writing, accessing university library resources remotely, and more. So those were kind of some of the activities that we did in the 2019-2020 academic year. We also, it was our second full year of offering our full grants or awards program. You can check out our website, which has a list of recipients organized by year with bios and photos of all of the students who've received travel awards, scholarships, student stipends, undergraduate summer studentships as well. And we invite those students to participate at events like our Student Symposia today and our annual general meeting. So we are meeting as a committee this Friday to adjudicate the awards for this year. And I'm hoping that at our June event, those students will, who are awarded, will present their work at our annual gathering. So I won't say too much more about that. We offer generally the same awards each year. We did have a COVID-specific call this past year, which I'll touch base on in a little while. And we may make some more changes just because obviously we offer travel awards to undergraduate and graduate students. Nobody's doing very much traveling right now. And though we've expanded the terms of that award to include conference fees for students who are still attending conferences and you need to pay to register. Obviously that fund is larger than a handful of conference fees that are happening online. So we may need to think through what that looks like moving forward, given the timeline of the grant and the duration of COVID restrictions over the next year or two. So we may need to continue to get a little bit creative around figuring out how best to kind of make those work for students. Next, we have our mentorship committee. And the mentorship committee met for the first time in September 2019 after our AGM in June of 2019. We sort of struck a couple extra committees. And so this committee met initially to discuss developing a cascading mentorship model that would include students from secondary and tertiary education, as well as faculty and knowledge keepers. We reconvened in October 2020 after COVID kind of changed some of these activities. And so over the last, 6 months or so, I've been working with that committee to develop a new non-credit course around graduate student publishing. And it's based on a book by the same name, Writing Your Journal Article in 12 Weeks, but adapting it for our purposes. So we have an open call right now. So if you are a graduate student or if you know graduate students who might be interested, that the application for that course is available on our website. It is a little bit more, I don't want to say time heavy. I know like it would be an hour and a half in person each week, and then some reading and work on outside of that, trying to figure out the balance between synchronous and asynchronous learning. So if we're not able to, if we don't have enough interest over the next little bit in the course, we may try offering it in the summer when students have a little bit more time. But if we're not able to offer it right away, I will continue. We've got some speakers lined up from the academic publishing industry, faculty who sit on review panels, that kind of thing. So we'll proceed at least with some of those kind of webinars and resources for students. And I was just talking to some students this morning about some other ideas for kind of write-ins and things that we can do to kind of bring people together to work on writing while everybody's working remotely for the next little while. So that's kind of what's happening with the mentorship committee. We've got quite a diverse group of people involved in that, who've also offered their time to, give presentations and participate with students there. So we are hoping to maybe eventually down the road expand that to include international student participation, but we'll kind of do our pilot and then kind of figure out, how we may need to adapt it so that it works for those purposes. And the evaluation committee meets a couple times a year. We last met in August, and Michael Heimlich will be sharing shortly information on the midterm report. Initially, because the 2019-2020 year was the third year, the third of 5 years, kind of that midpoint of the mentorship network. We wanted to kind of learn a little bit more about where we were at in relation to some of our objectives. And so we had a summer student, Aidan Tournier, work with us this past summer. And initially the plan for that was to do interviews through the summer months with students who've been involved in the mentorship network over the last few years. Because of COVID, some of the ethics were delayed and things just took a little bit longer than we initially had planned. So that wasn't completed until November. So Michael will be sharing a little bit more on the findings from that report, and the committee will be meeting in the next little bit to kind of discuss the report itself and then some future planning around evaluation and the conclusion of the network in the next couple of years as well, or I shouldn't say the conclusion, but the transition of the network under the umbrella of the NEAR grant, or the First Nations and Métis Health Research Network. What I also want to mention, and I'll maybe share it with you guys in the chat once maybe Michael's doing his presentation, is that some of the other mentorship networks across the country are also undertaking some evaluation research. The Alberta network in particular is looking to interview students and faculty, mentors and mentees not necessarily exclusively associated with the mentorship networks, but more broadly as well, about their experiences with Indigenous mentorship. And they are conducting those interviews and focus groups over the next couple months. So they are looking for students to participate, and then faculty. I believe it's a survey that they want faculty to do. So I will share the link to that. So if you know, if you want to fill it out yourself, or if you know anybody else who might be interested, I just want to kind of highlight that that's something that the Alberta Indigenous Mentorship Network is working on, and then they'll be sharing their results with each individual network, as well as their findings kind of more broadly. So I will make sure to share that in the chat following my presentation. And our outreach committee, we haven't met in a while. Obviously, our outreach activities have changed quite a bit because of COVID. In 2019, in the summer, we went to a number of powwows, community events, had info booths at those kind of to raise awareness about some of the network, some of the opportunities that we have for undergraduate student research, awards, and other activities for graduate students. In the 2019-2020 year, I was able to participate in the .CASIS STEM conference in February, just before the pandemic hit. But since then, some of those activities have kind of had to be put on hold in some capacity anyways, and we've kind of changed focus a little bit to doing more activities and events with the other mentorship networks across the country. So some of our outreach has kind of shifted. Earlier today, I was on a call, not a call, sorry, a workshop webinar with the Aboriginal Students Centre. They did a session on grad studies. So I kind of helped in terms of organizing that. Susan Schachter out of admissions and recruitment led the organization of that event. And so we're hoping to do more events like that online to kind of connect with students. But we're always open to ideas and new members. So if you have ideas for how we can get creative in terms of student outreach, particularly to maybe high school or undergraduate students during COVID, I'm definitely all ears, because I know that we can be doing more. And we had hired a graduate student to help with some of our outreach, but they've had to take a step back just because of some of the demands of schooling. So that's certainly an area that we could be doing more in, and that I'm looking forward to working with some of the other mentorship networks on continuing to do activities across the country as well. So this past year has looked quite a bit different. In March, we started working from home, probably most people on the call as well. In April, we did a call for writing groups and online mentorship, and we offered stipends to students who participated, and it was kind of a way to get funding out to students. At the beginning of the pandemic, when we were hearing that summer jobs were kind of drying up or things had changed, and it was obviously a tough time as people were losing out on some of their part-time or other employment. So we had, I think we did 17, there were about 17 students who participated in the writing groups, and 7 who we set up online mentorship sessions with through that call, though the online mentorship continues to be something that we do as a kind of a regular offering as well. We also hosted in the fall an online orientation to let students know about the network and some of the activities that we have on the go and some of our online resources. In August, we also moved spaces. So we have been located at St. Andrew's College, and at the end of the summer, we moved to Station 20 West. I will say my office, or the Mentorship Network office, will eventually be in the Health Sciences building post-pandemic, I think, so that we're on campus and more accessible for students. We haven't moved to that space yet, but I have an office number, so I'm hoping, as things kind of ease up a little bit, hopefully in the spring and summer, I'll be able to move there. And then post-pandemic, we'll be kind of back and forth between those two spaces. And the offices that we have on campus are on the 4th floor of the Health Sciences building, near that new Indigenous health research cluster. So that'll be nice for sure. Most of our resources are online. I won't go into that too much more. Lots of online changes because of COVID-19. I'll kind of just skip through this, as I mentioned a number of these things already. And then I'll just highlight some of the partnership projects that we're doing across mentorship networks. So in August of last year, after Western wasn't able to host the National Gathering of Graduate Students, which was planned for May, we kind of pivoted and did an online event. Over 170 students representing all regions of Canada participated in that, which was really awesome. And we had lots of faculty mentors give workshops for students. And we're planning on doing something kind of similar come this June as well. So, so that's been kind of nice that because of the shift with COVID, we've been able to do a few more online activities across the networks and bring students together, who are kind of working across the country and building some networks that way. So this past January, the timing wasn't particularly good because most universities ended up not coming back to campus, virtually at least, until later in January. But the first week of January, we hosted a recruitment fair where faculty at institutions across the country could share what they were working on in terms of their research, whether or not they had funding for students, and students could learn a little bit about some of the opportunities for, doing a master's, PhD, or a postdoc with different researchers across Canada. So we're hoping to do more events like that in the future, and in particular, one area that we're working on becoming more involved in is French language and Northern students as well. So there isn't a Northern Indigenous mentorship network or mentorship network in any of the territories. So that's definitely like some of the mentorship networks, like we have a relationship with a research institute in the Northwest Territories, but there aren't a lot of students there. So at least at the graduate level. So trying to figure out ways to kind of get creative and connect with students in other areas and other researchers that are working in those places as well. So that's kind of something that's on our radar over the next little bit that we'll be doing. And then one of the other things that I've been working on with the other coordinators is a report across the network. So kind of recognizing that we're all at this midpoint or just past the midpoint of the mentorship network grants across the country, some of which will kind of continue under the umbrella of the NEAR and some of which may not. So kind of thinking about what that looks like in the coming years, and whether lobbying, that means lobbying for funding to support those networks that don't have kind of a direct link to a NEAR center. So those are kind of some of the things that we're working through as a group. And that we'll continue kind of working on over the next little bit. So that's a very quick, hopefully not too quick summary of the 2019-2020 annual report. It's available on the website. And if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I will take a peek at that now as well. And I'll introduce Michael Heimlich. So we've worked with Michael the last few years on